Good afternoon, friends and comrades, or I should say good evening at this point. I just finished doing a video in Spanish, my second language, on this very important topic. I'm going to be giving my position, or what I think the position of the independent socialists in all nations should be regarding the very grave situation in Ukraine today. I want to first mention that my grandfather was of Russian Jewish descent. Some of the relatives arrived in the United States through Ukraine, through Odessa. And somebody who has been guided by the philosophy of socialism for the past 2 decades, who's well versed in the history of revolutionary leaders from the region like Lenin, Trotsky, etc. I've taken a personal interest at the history of the region, and I am currently enrolled for my master's in history. I have not picked a thesis yet. I'm considering the thesis being on Eastern Europe or Russia or Latin America. I'm very versed in, traveled in Latin America. I have been to Europe, but I have not been to Eastern Europe yet. But a lot of Americans, and I'm going to reflect on some different things that I didn't mention in the Spanish video because that was a different audience, but some similar things as well, same position ultimately. There's a lot of Americans that I try to recruit to clubs or causes that have to do with our foreign policy, our sanctions, our policies that are imperialistic or corporative, that hurt people like indigenous people in the Amazon, like the Venezuelan people who are pride people fighting for their rights and their rights over their natural resources. And when I speak to these Americans here in the U.S. empire about these things, often, I get a disinterest. They're always a minority that have an interest, that may actively support the cause eventually, that will come to our side. But the overwhelming majority of the masses, or the students, even the younger ones that are supposed to be more open-minded, less indoctrinated, you could say, the majority have an disinterest. Suddenly, the same majority that I talk to, that have no interest whatsoever in U.S. foreign policy, or want to know even the basic history of U.S. foreign policy and interventionism in different regions of the world, especially the Third World, also known as the Global South. Now, these Americans are coming out and saying, oh, we know everything about Ukraine. Oh, this is all Putin's fault. Oh, this is a naked war of aggression, unprovoked, and all the other CNN and fake news talking points that they're repeating like parrots. And these are Americans that if you try to have them look for Ukraine on the map, they can't find. Why suddenly are they experts in this history? The writer, what was his name? Well, his name will come to me, but I'm going to paraphrase his quote. There was a writer, and he said this about 100 years ago, and it's still true, that said, actually, I don't think it's a paraphrase, it's a literal quote, it's a short quote, concise. He said, God invented war so that Americans could learn geography. And so it's only that we know the geography suddenly of the Middle East or of Eastern Europe or of Russia when there's a war declared or a war that we're trying to hypocritically be against, where Putin actually has a lot more justification to intervene than we ever did, for example, in Iraq, a war we know now that's purely based on lies, and that the political actors here in the U.S. empire that were behind that war are all saying they were deceived, or all trying to distance themselves from that catastrophe. It was Mark Twain. That was the writer I was thinking of. And so, with all the technology in the information age, a lot of times ignorance is a choice. Unless, you're working class. A lot of working class people have to work 2-3 jobs to survive, provide for their families. They don't have time to go on Google and learn about these things. But everybody seems to know now what's going on in Ukraine. You have a lot of pretending, right? But again, with the information age, we can't say that we can't learn geography. There's a systemic problem where ignorance is promoted, where even if you had a bad history or a bad geography professor or teacher, you can yourself go on and learn the geography. I had a friend once, an American, very intelligent. She didn't know where Santo Domingo was in Latin America. And I asked her, how did you learn? Where were you educated? Private, public? Publicly educated. And she said her teacher made them memorize the names of countries. Of course, you don't learn through memorization. You learn through storytelling. If she was told passionately the history of each region, of each country, and its capitals, at least, because Santo Domingo is a capital, she probably would have very well known where Santo Domingo is located. But back on the topic at hand, the EU, out of reaction to the Russian operation in Ukraine, has done a lot of concerning things, as well as the United States. I'm going to get into that and what I think the position of of independent socialists should be. We should unite behind that. The EU recently banned both the Russian outlets RT and Sputnik. That's very concerning. And I don't think it's legal under any EU law. I lived for a time in the EU. I've been in RT. It's important for the other view to get out. And they're just imposing a totalitarian European view. And they're covering up the fact that Europe, prior to the Western-backed coup in Kiev in 2014, had condemned these same groups that have infiltrated the Ukrainian forces, such as the Azov Battalion or the Right Sector. So these neo-Nazi groups that were condemned by the EU have now been, the past few years, backed by the EU. And so imposing this totalitarian view is very concerning. Something else the EU did that particularly pisses me off as a university student is they have started in several EU states expelling Russian students simply because they happen to be born in Russia or of Russian ethnicity. This is a complete violation of their rights. Exchange students in general help promote peace in the world. To get rid of that is going to inevitably promote war in the world. And what's the alternative to finding a diplomatic solution in Ukraine is World War III, which could be nuclear war and destruction of the entire planet, entire generations of people. Something the U.S. done recently, which I found reminiscent of the U.S. invasion of the Venezuelan embassy in Washington, D.C. in 2019, of which I was a witness of, and also, of course, of the capture of Ambassador Alex Saab, the Venezuelan ambassador. I had the pleasure of meeting his wife while I went to Venezuela last year. These are examples of violations of the Vienna Convention, which the U.S. is a signatory of. So quite recently, the United States invaded Russian embassy territories or properties in New York and expelled about a dozen Russian diplomats. I mean, you had in wartime things like that not even happen, where the United States did that against a hostile government. So this is very concerning. Here in the United States, RT is still functioning. Who knows for how much longer? But these are a complete violation of our rights, and we should be going out to the streets and going to our college campuses and protesting this. And not necessarily protesting that Putin is doing a war against Nazis or anything like that, but protesting out of solidarity and protection of the Russian and the Jewish minorities and other minorities in Ukraine that have been under attack all these years, these constant provocations against the Russian state that resulted in this intervention. At the same time, also be in favor of dialogue, which is currently going on in Belarus. So thank you, friends and comrades, for listening. Let us unite.